haven't reviewed many small-scale projects on this channel, and there are several reasons for that. Firstly, there simply haven't been that many compelling intimate films released recently that weren't analysis. Secondly, those projects that have piqued my interest have already been dissected on this channel. However, a peculiar situation arose with the film The Drama. My foreign recommendation feed, as I do enjoy pursuing overseas reels on TikToks, was suddenly inundated with discussions and even minor scandals pertaining to this particular project. The social media sphere was rife with commentary both positive and negative concerning the esteemed Pattinson and Zendaya following their promotional campaign videos for the film.
The Mormons are protesting. The feminists hate us. Catholics, what do we do to the Catholics? Liza Minnelli? The American Nazi Party. Oh wait, this is fan mail.
My impetus for watching this film, however, extended beyond mere curiosity piqued by external sources. Despite my rather pedestrian film critic credentials, I possess a tangible familiarity with the acting prowess of both Zendaya and Robert Pattinson. Pattinson's acting in Twilight immediately captivated me. In all seriousness, Zendaya's performance was genuinely striking, in marked departure from her roles in projects like Shake It Up and Spider-Man. Back then I wasn't nearly astute enough to envision such partnership materializing in a project of this nature. However, having now witnessed the film in its entirety, a veritable torrent of grievouses, elations, and sundry observations demands utterance. I intend to dissect this film along the cinematic lines it professes, which, while not particularly numerous, are profoundly and pervasively ingrained within its very fabric. Thus, with scant regard for the well-being of my beleaguered neuros, I have once again provisioned myself with copious amounts of valerian root extract, and am primed for a meticulous analysis of all that I have seen. My name is Catherine, and this is my personal and frankly inconsequential opinion and review on the film The Drama. Before we commence, I'd like to extend my profound gratitude to my supporters on Boosty. This channel wouldn't exist without your patronage. Should you wish to contribute to my channel's development, please scan the QR code displayed. Furthermore, I appreciate each and every subscription. The film opens with the protagonists, namely Charlie and Emma, in the throes of preparing for their wedding. They rehearse their vows to each other in front of friends. Robert Pattinson delivers an intriguing and unexpected performance, embodying the quintessential inhibited, stammering, and self-doubting schoolboy, complete with spectacles, who invariably finds himself trouserless when confronted with Zendaya. Zendaya delivers an equally intriguing performance, portraying something of an enigmatic figure with a promising backstory, which we'll delve into shortly. We discover how the pair first encountered each other. Zendaya was engrossed in a book at a cafe when Pattinson happened to walk in. Keen to strike up a conversation, but at a loss for how to do so, he resorted to a rather contrived tactic. Discreetly photographing the book, absorbing its details, much like I would before a literature class, and then approaching her armed with this knowledge, hoping to charm her. Charm might be too strong a word. For the most part, he merely strummed and mumbled incoherently. Zendaya remained unresponsive to these overtures, not because they were the level of the schoolboy's pick-up atoms, but because, as it turns out, she's deaf in one ear. Nevertheless, an acquaintance blossomed between them. Subsequently were shown the intensive preparations leading up to the wedding. The bride and groom rehearsed their first dance, engaged in miscellaneous activities during breaks, and deliberated their nuptial nonces. Furthermore, the graduates introduce us to the couple's inner circle, the bridesmaid and, naturally, the best man. While the best man is a perfectly reasonable, mature individual who offers sound advice on married life, the bridesmaid is an exceptionally toxic creature. My very first encounter with her elicited a ghastly grimace of distaste. Returning for their first dance rehearsal, the engaged couple happened upon the DJ partaking in illicit substances. Once I won't specify, lest I incur a lifetime ban, and I advised you against it too. The pair were understandably disconcerted, unsure of how to proceed with their wedding fast approaching. While Pattinson was inclined to replace her outright, Zendaya seemed less perturbed. Fortuitously, they were en route to meet friends, offering an opportune moment to solicit advice before making a final decision. With both couples gathered, Pattinson and Zendaya were mulling over their options with the best man and maid of honor regarding the DJ situation, and whom to scout as a replacement. After all, substance use of many kinds represents a deeply concerning dilemma, and could potentially jeopardize the DJ's professional competence during the reception. Opinions were also divided among their friends, with several potential courses of action being debated. On one hand, had a couple remained oblivious, the transgression would have been inconsequential and the wedding could have proceeded without incident. However, the reprehensible act had come to light, necessitating a response. Indeed, the unveiling of the cat and aficionado's dark side prompted those present to engage with candid confessions, lubricated by generous measures of strong liquor. Thus, the assembled company, both men and women, began recounting the most egregious misdeeds they had perpetrated in their lives, with the black friend of the groom taking the lead in this confessional exercise.
Oh shit, here we go again.
What reprehensible act could a black man possibly commit? In this film, the most egregious thing he does is shield his ex-girlfriend from a vicious dog attack. Hardly a damning indictment, isn't it? What exactly were you expecting? Next in line was the bridesmaid, and my negative feelings toward her were certainly justified. She's an unhinged sociopath and trait that's oddly downplayed. The crux of the matter lies in an incident during her adolescence. A young neighbor invited her to play, but she instead lured him to a derelict location and locked him inside the cabinet. Subsequently, a search party was publicized for several days. His distraught father even joined in the effort to locate the missing child. Yet she remained silent throughout. It's rather telling how, in passing it almost dismissively, she glossed over the situation, stating, "He's fine, everything's okay, all's well," as for attempting to deflect further inquiry. However, I suspect she deliberately committed the act. Don't misunderstand me, but it strikes me as highly improbable that anyone recalling such an event would be smiling and laughing. A person of sound mind would express either empathy and remorse, or at least some degree of contrition. Yet she was grinning from ear to ear like I do after swatting a buzzing mosquito on the first try after a sleepless night. The crucial defenses being, of course, that a bloodsucker inflicts harm, whereas in her case, it involved a defenseless, confined child. Pattinson recounts a deeply regrettable incident from his adolescence, admitting to such relentless online harassment of a child that the family was compelled to relocate. It was a thoroughly despicable act, and I vehemently condemn bullying in all its forms. However, Pattinson's words also conveyed a sense of genuine remorse of his actions. And Zendaya, who nonchalantly recounts a past adolescent fantasy involving a school shooting. The very act of discharging a rifle in the woods during her teenage years ironically resulted in the hearing loss in one ear. Pattinson incredulous dismisses it as a jest, assuming she is merely recounting a stand-up routine. The groom questioned her, pointing out that he had claimed to be deaf from birth, which turned out to be untrue. Her eardrum had ruptured and bled as a result of practicing her shooting skills. She had indeed entertained all such considerations. At this revelation, everyone was utterly dumbfounded and, to put it mildly, taken aback. The bridesmaid is becoming increasingly indignant, blaming Zendaya for everything under the sun, even implying her involvement in her cousin's disability by drawing spurious parallels. Pattinson is utterly bewildered. He initially assumes Zendaya is joking, given her impeccable record as a high-achieving, athletic and politically engaged individual, even an outspoken activist against gun sales. However, Zendaya asserts that no, she genuinely harbored such desires. First over 30 seconds if you're eaten. Whether it's due to peer pressure, unpleasant memories, or an excess of alcohol, thanks to Zendaya, we discovered that the filmmakers involved harbor emetophilia, an attraction to the act of vomiting. The protagonist proceeds to impulsively vomit over everyone, bringing the evening to its logical, albeit grotesque conclusion, prompting everyone to call it a night. All seemed to be progressing smoothly. That evening, the couple gained a deeper understanding of each other, and their protagonists know the truth, achieving closure. Zendaya, haunted by her body's inability to communicate effectively, requested a postponement of any difficult conversation or clarifying questions until the following day, to which her sweetheart nodded in agreement. Robert Pattinson embodies a remarkably grounded young man, displaying a nuanced understanding of his partner, exhibiting genuine care, and demonstrating a willingness to engage in calm, rational discussing regarding pressing issues in the morning after. Wouldn't you agree? No, that's not quite right. This is precisely where the whole charade, this so-called drama, truly kicks off. Because instead of constructive dialogue the following day, we're presented with incoherent, fragmented interactions. Robert Pattinson begins to clam up, appearing lost and even somewhat intimidated by Emma, our protagonist. As the esteemed Manuel Kant wrote, the ability to ask reasonable questions is a sure sign of intelligence and insight. It goes without saying that our protagonist possesses neither. Instead of first and foremost addressing the issue with, shall we say, the part responsible for the disharmony, he runs off to complain to a friend, proclaiming Emma to be mendacious and utterly untruthful. Furthermore, he declares he no longer wishes to marry at all. Well, his feelings are understandable even with the change of heart regarding marriage. Wouldn't it theoretically make sense to sit down and discuss all the pertinent points with his beloved beforehand? Even immediately after she awakens, he begins peppering her with relevant questions, ones that bear no consequence on the interpersonal dynamics or personal growth, such as: would you like to speak with a psychologist? How did you cope with that? Instead, he launches into a barrage of accusations and applies undue pressure. The implication was that she hadn't told me everything, that she was keeping something from me. A crestfallen Zendaya was at a loss for words. She tentatively began to recount her own experiences as a teenager, revealing how she too had been subjected to harassment and bullying. Thus, channeling her rebellious spirit, she found herself drawn to a particular subculture fixed on weaponry. She savored capturing images of herself wielding firearms, engaging in target practice and producing menacing videos. As a young girl devoid of any sense of stability, Zendaya resolved to become both a bulwark and a source of intimidation for everyone else. However, everything shifted irrevocably the day she confronted the stark reality of gunfire in a shopping mall, an event that claimed the life of a classmate. Post-incident and following the platitudes of post-school unity programs, she underwent a transformative shift, even becoming an outspoken advocate against the unfettered sale of firearms. Indeed, the director's predilection for women is further evinced by yet another scene, in which Zendaya, amidst the ensuing morning's explanation, also falls in. However, this explanation falls short for Pattinson, who suspects something amiss. He posits that Emma remains unwell, and that individuals are inherently incapable of genuine self-improvement, perpetuating falsehoods. The information suggesting that actual shootings and terrorist attacks have reshaped Zendaya's perception for the horror does not suffice as an answer for Pattinson. Meanwhile, wedding preparations continue apace. Our couple is off to the photographer's studio to peruse potential packages and storyboards. However, the seeds of discord have already been sown, and a palpable rift is forming between them. Zendaya finds herself at a loss for further justification, caught as she is between having initially withheld a significant aspect for her troubled past and now, conversely having laid bare all the details. Robert Pattinson, however, appears unable to reconcile himself to the fact that Zendaya was matured into a different person, potentially having outgrown experiences from her adolescence. In all honesty, I wasn't particularly impressed by the rehearsal photoshoot scene, where the photographer requests they list their partner's best qualities. It seemed to make them more tense, not less. They uttered repeat obvious platitudes, like children making amends after a quarrel. Pattinson remarked on her kindness, understanding, and sensitivity, while Zendaya stated that Pattinson was broad-minded and multifaceted, exchanging thinly veiled digs and backhanded compliments. Frankly, I felt that particular scene was rather superfluous in a film already replete with fascinating and multifaceted sequences. One could visually savor the preceding scenes, but this one. Subsequently, Pattinson even develops a degree of apprehension towards his bride-to-be at certain junctures. His cherished mark emblazoned with the word should is unceremoniously discarded. Zendaya, seen meticulously chopping vegetables and preparing smoothies, is also perceived as a potential menace, particularly given the presence of a knife. Naturally, these simmering misunderstandings precipitate a discernible shift in the complexion of the wedding vows.
Did I ever tell you what the definition of insanity is? Insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change.
You know, it's starting to get insanity. Pattinson gets even more worked up. He found himself dredging up disparate words, catching phrases and allusions Zendaya had uttered throughout their time together, regardless of their relevance to shooting, school, and weaponry. For instance, he'd retroactively construed her assertive retort to a reckless driver who nearly hit them in a crosswalk as a manifestation of underlying aggression. M is attempting to alleviate the tension, or rather, to initiate a reasonable dialogue. However, Charlie Pattinson remains exceedingly evasive. Naturally, any sentiments directed towards his partner are now inconceivable. As he would utter pleasantries at his own wedding. He has completely transformed his discourse. Emma is no longer considered empathetic, kind, or loving. She has become a non-entity simply because he has obliterated any vestige of her former self. In all honesty, as I watched, I couldn't shake the feeling that Emma wasn't the villain everyone made her out to be, painting her as some sort of psychopath. While she undoubtedly harbors secrets, she consistently presents a calm, composed demeanor in this situation and constantly appears open to discourse. He found himself dredging up disparate words, catching phrases and allusions Zendaya had uttered throughout their time together, regardless of their relevance to shooting, school, and weaponry. For instance, he'd retroactively construed her assertive retort to a reckless driver who nearly hit them in a crosswalk as a manifestation of underlying aggression. M is attempting to alleviate the tension, or rather, to initiate a reasonable dialogue. However, Charlie Pattinson remains exceedingly evasive. Naturally, any sentiments directed towards his partner are now inconceivable. As he would utter pleasantries at his own wedding. He has completely transformed his discourse. Emma is no longer considered empathetic, kind, or loving. She has become a non-entity simply because he has obliterated any vestige of her former self. In all honesty, as I watched, I couldn't shake the feeling that Emma wasn't the villain everyone made her out to be, painting her as some sort of psychopath. While she undoubtedly harbors secrets, she consistently presents a calm, composed demeanor in this situation and constantly appears open to discourse. And Charlie, who is just not an avoided type of attachment, but a reigning man. As the ancient Confucian saying goes, wolves cannot outrun their own nature, for one cannot escape the pack. Similarly, one cannot simply flee from their own fears and self-inflicted anxieties. This whole situation escalates to a point of almost cosmic absurdity. When Emma implores everyone to refrain from divulging such matters and instead discuss them in person, Robert Pattinson proceeds as follows. Initially, upon discovering a magazine at the work featuring women photographed with weaponry, he promptly summons the black-best man and the bridesmaid for a general assembly. Frankly, I suspect the bridesmaid herself planted the magazine. However, this is merely my penchant for uncovering ulterior motives. Subsequently, he dissected the entire affair with these very friends, embellishing the facts with fabrications and conjecture that are wholly extraneous. Essentially, Emma had a neighbor during her childhood. They only met a couple of times. The girl then perished in a car accident. Pattinson, however, misrepresented the facts to his friends, asserting that Emma's desire to engage in a school shooting stemmed from the trauma of witnessing firsthand the carnage and entrails and the demise of, in his styling, her supposed best friend. I wonder if he embellished the account for the sake of colorful language, concocting the excuse for these friends, who meticulously pieced it all together, forging a cause-and-effect relationship in his own mind? To further exacerbate matters, the bridesmaid, who, as a reminder, deliberately locked the child in, is only adding fuel to the fire. Yet simultaneously deflects any scrutiny, claiming complete ignorance. She suggests Zendaya engaged in deliberate provocations resulting in self-harm, recounts an acquaintance's disability from a similar incident, and then incongruously asserts her own distinct situation. Why are you dwelling on the tedious fabrication of an inconsequential bridesmaid? Perhaps an engaged viewer might interject here. However, the perplexed author dares to counter such assertions. Let's be candid. Circumstances vary. The bridesmaid, I reiterate, locked up the child who had been the subject of an extensive days-long search by a search party and the police, compounding this by deliberately withholding information regarding his whereabouts. Yet Zendaya has done absolutely nothing wrong. Subsequently, she even spearheaded activist movements.
Some of our bonding was the phone calls of like, hey, can we talk real quick? Like, just saw you an hour ago, what's up, Rob?
Tell me
she got me removed from the project. Well,
желание.
Scene witnessed this very bridesmaid secret talent to show up for work, thereby jeopardizing everyone, including Zendaya. Am I alone in perceiving that this so-called friend is actually instigating trouble and undermining the relationship of our couple? It begs the question whose perspective we, as the audience, are privy to. Robert Pattinson's, an objective outsider's, or Emma's? I remained uncertain. Perhaps you have your own conjectures to whose viewpoint is being presented. It appeared to me that, for the most part, verbs of the events through Robert Pattinson's eyes, given his significant screen time. However, towards the film's conclusion, I began to wonder if it were in fact occupying the perspective of the groom's black friend, observing them holding down. It descends into an absurdity bordering on a mind-number paradox. Even in the realm of intimacy, Emma no longer elicits a Rosalind Charlie, indicative of the profound impact this has had on him. Consequently, Pattinson is finding it increasingly arduous to suppress his inquiries regarding this situation. Yet, since engaging in a rational discourse with his beloved proves more challenging than is in an advanced mathematics examination, he is prone to outmodern himself on his works upon the first available ear. Charlie thus posed the question to his colleague: would it be considered respectable if one's male partner had harbored youthful aspirations or instigated a school shooting? Sensing something amiss, the colleague retorted that it was indeed abnormal and that she would summon the police. At this, Pattinson completely lost the composure, breaking down and weeping. Incidentally, a further scene involving a nursery flickered interview somewhere within this temporal sequence. So, if you're eating, bon appetit, may you enjoy your meal and the spiritually uplifting program. In a fit of hysterics, he bursts into the room, dissolving into uncontrollable sobs. Subsequently, when a female colleague attempts to offer him comfort with embrace, he initiates a passionate kiss, hoists her onto the desk, spreads her legs, and then desists. It was hard to describe my emotions after that scene. Is it a betrayal? Yep. Is it justified? No. Can we understand Pattinson's feelings? Maybe. But I don't. Throughout the entire film, I found it difficult to comprehend why a grown, affluent and similarly level-handed young man couldn't simply take his partner's hand, sit down and directly address his concerns. He equivocates while it's Emma who endeavors to engage, initiate conversation and articulate that troubled her, explaining why she had modified her perspectives. But was it interesting to watch this movie, let alone review it?
Nope.
The real mayhem invariably erupts on the wedding day. Initially, everything seems to proceed rather smoothly, succinctly, so and tolerably. The guests have arrived, even that wretched toxic friend has offered her congratulations, and the colleague with whom Pattinson had his indiscretion is all smiles. The ceremony commences with a series of congratulatory speeches. While the content and toast vary, Zendaya's father's address particularly resonated with me. He started to paraphrase, "My daughter was perpetually enamored with imagination. She envisioned herself on stage with the world as her audience, frequently standing elaborate performances and shows of my wife and I, our relatives, and her schoolmates." Esteemed viewers and keen observers, I formulated, as it were, two nascent theories. Firstly, is it not conceivable that as a teenager, Zendaya might have envisioned a personal fantasy? A theater of the mind where she was the sole performer and everyone else an audience. Improvising scenarios as extreme as the school shooting. Haven't we all at some point projected various scenarios within the confines of our own minds? But this hardly implies a conscious desire to actually perpetrate such devastation. That's point one. Secondly, is it not possible that Zendaya, during a voluntary gathering with friends, introduced this notion and continues to play the role of a solitary actor? Perhaps she, too, is a dark horse in this unfolding drama. In any case, we're given no further leads beyond this paternal monologue. I find the theory posit an adolescent fantasy more compelling. Perhaps she entertained such thoughts and projected certain scenarios, but had absolutely no intention of causing harm or pain to anyone. It may have been an attempt to garner attention, prompting her to stage a one-person show in real life. Alternatively, the notion of actually going to the school might have been entirely absent. She simply conjured up a continuation of the entire event in her mind. In perusing various reviews, I encountered numerous theories. However, I was particularly struck by a film critique positing that the entirety of what transpires on screen is nothing more than the delusional figments of Pattinson's character's imagination. Indeed, it has been quite some time, my friends, since we had a similar occurrence of this channel. I relish those moments after watching a film when you're left utterly discombobulated, mulling our theories, not the vappy, disjointed ramblings of fan theories, where one can haphazardly spew nonsensical information, but rather the kind of subtle cues that culminate in a sort of intellectual pile-up. Head-to-head tensions are escalating rapidly, as Pattinson had worked himself into a complete frenzy. The bridesmaid is stirring up trouble again, making subtly vicious remarks. She congratulated the newlyweds while superstitiously highlighting all their past transgressions in front of all the guests. During the intermission, Zendaya, while in the restroom, overhears Charlie's colleague and bridesmaid gossiping about the school shooting. Unbelievable! Now that's a conundrum. Who could they possibly be talking about? I couldn't even be to hazard a guess. Upon hearing this, Zendaya relentlessly interrogates colleague and invites her and finance to a discussion, as she had explicitly asked her below to keep this private. At this point, the colleague abruptly exposes their unfaithful partner, divulging that Charlie was the initial aggressor, initiating physical contact, kissing her, and attempting further advances. Zendaya is utterly stunned. The audience is equally aghast. This further corroborates the theory positing Pattinson as the antagonist, considering he proactively confronted his colleague precisely when she sought to console him during his emotional outburst. The moment arrives for Robert Pattinson's speech, and the whole thing wears sweetly, of course. He abruptly commands the entire room to cease mentioning Emma, immediately conflating these pronouncements with their relationship, affection, and conflict. The resultant mess is utterly repugnant. However, the speech is cut short by an irate male colleague who confronts Pattinson, demanding to know if he harassed or kissed her. Pattinson denies it and is promptly winded. He is then subjected to a severe and brutal beating. Meanwhile, Emma absconds from the wedding. So, what picture emerges from all of this? It appears every wedding guest, numbering over 100, is now privy to Zendaya's past aspiration to use school children as targets. Robert Pattinson has been thoroughly humiliated, branded with the stigma of infidelity. The wedding has imploded, the bride having absconded. A fairy tale ending, wouldn't you say? Crestfallen and dejected Robert Pattinson, who unsurprisingly remains unresponsive. After a string of pathetic dial attempts, he resigns himself to a stark realization. Love is ephemeral, but there is necessity of sustenance and duress. Ergo, food is paramount. He then entertains the notion of nocturnal pilgrimage to a dinner for burgers, precisely as Emma had previously suggested. As fate would have it, he encounters his bride to be in a wedding dress at his late-night dinner. She too is drifting aimlessly through the city, at a loss for what to do. It's in this very establishment that our protagonists orchestrated their initial encounter. Emma takes the initiative, inquiring, "Mind if I join you?" And finally, Pattinson reciprocates her desire to sit down, have a proper conversation, and make a fresh start. This is the first time I've said it on my channel, but this movie is truly groundbreaking, and a breath of fresh air. Initially, the extensive PR campaign, trailers and posters lead you to believe you are in a full standard rom-com centered around matrimony. However, what you are actually presented with is a disquieting exploration of relationships. The scenes featuring the couple are at times both hilarious and deeply upsetting. In truth, my anticipation of this film was significantly heightened by my mere knowledge of the project's director. Kristoffer Borgli's filmography is, without exaggerations, replete with veritable cinematic gems that have resonated across generations, including such iconic works as Hachi, Goodfellas, Pretty Woman and La La Land. This latest endeavor certainly proves to be no exception. I was thoroughly impressed by the director's adept manipulation of emotional highs and lows. The film immediately shocks the audience with a stark introduction, delivering unflinchingly harsh details regarding Emma's past. Subsequently, the emotional intensity is gradually amplified, culminating in a powerful crescendo in the third act. Furthermore, as I previously stated, the visuals are truly remarkable. The camera begins to It's a rather intriguing experience for my channel, as we seldom encounter such ambiguous resolutions in projects these days. The film seems to pose the question of whether individuals should be judged for their thoughts, yet simultaneously remains reticent and ambivalent on the matter itself. Social media platforms are rife with discontent regarding Zendaya's acting prowess, a sentiment I vehemently dispute. From her initial revelation to the film's denouement, her character undergoes a palpable internal bifurcation, masterfully conveyed by Zendaya. She elicits a simultaneous sense of empathy and exasperation from the audience, a testament to her skill. Pattinson furnishes us with a similar reflective experience. The character's inner demons progressively consume him, culminating in a gaze that encapsulates the utter desolation and futility of his circumstances. Regarding their revelations themselves, I keen to discuss this with you in the comments. Ladies and gentlemen, do you believe such candor was warranted? Should skeletons of this nature be unearthed or not? And crucially, how should one process such information when it's divulged? Share your thoughts, please. Once again, my sincere gratitude to everyone for your continuous support on Boosty. Please scan this QR code and thank you for subscribing. I wish you all the best. Bye.